Welcome to 1999, the podcast. I'm John Brooks,
I'm Jen Tisdale.
and we are doing a very special episode today.
Did you call it that on purpose?
It's an after-school special episode.
Can I say one thing up top?
Sure.
We're going to talk about some very upsetting things.
Yeah.
The internet's talking about it, and any jokes made. I think people understand that everybody here is punching up and not punching down, and we need a little gallows humor to relieve the hideous, upsetting tension. So, I think a lot of people just get upset at jokes in general around serious things without understanding that, oh boy, if you don't put some in there, it's bad. So
Yeah. We are talking today about Quiet on Set, the new documentary about the Dan Schneider years at Nickelodeon. And I want to do a little like where I'm coming from with this. I don't really know where you're coming from with this either. So like we're roughly the same age. So I, for a long time, got Dan Schneider and Dan Snyder confused. Dan Snyder,
both are bad people, might I add.
Bad, but Snyder is the guy who owned the team formerly known as the Washington football team.
And the team that I am a fan of and have been my whole life. So I have a negative relationship parasocially with Dan Schneider.
That's
the Dan Schneider cut.
Yes. Dan Schneider cut. That's a bad last name. They just do bad things. Sorry, Zack Snyder. I don't like your work.
Sorry, buddy.
Yeah. So no, we're talking about Dan Schneider, and I didn't know really who he was. So I learned from this documentary that he's the guy from Head of the Class, and I was like, "Oh, the guy from Head of the Class." That's where I'm connected.
Did you watch Head of the Class? Yeah, because
I watched Head of the Class.
Yeah, I watched Head of the Class, and then we can also lightly, obviously, discuss Brian Robbins, but shockingly, nothing mentioned about Brian Robbins in this documentary, which I feel anyway. Continue.
Right. No.
Also on Head of the Class, Brian Robbins. That's why I brought that name up. He was the one I had a crush on.
No, I remember him as the fat dorky guy from Head of the Class. And I think like when I read some stories about him in the last year or so, I was like, oh, I recognize that dude, but like I was like, but I guess he's a writer for Nickelodeon. So like, what would I, and
Kingmaker.
The Kingmaker from Nickelodeon. He is not. The Dan Schneider years are not my Nickelodeon years. He comes on to Nickelodeon in 1993, which is when all that starts, and that's his first show with Nickelodeon. We're talking about it really because one of his big shows and a big part of this documentary is the Amanda Show, and that starts in October of 1999. But yeah, I don't like. My childhood is not ruined by this, and I'm sure the way that some of our younger listeners, and by younger I mean like within a couple of years of us probably, right, are much more sort of connected to this era of like iCarly and the Amanda Show and Drake and Josh and all of that sort of thing. But for me, like my Nickelodeon sort of ends around that, like around 93, 94. But it's, it's like Roundhouse and Welcome Freshmen and like Salute Your Shorts and Pete. Like that's
Hey Dude.
And Hey Dude. Like that's what Nickelodeon is in my mind. And I remember, like, I certainly remember seeing some of all that and thinking that a lot of the cast members were quite talented, like Keenan and Kel, obviously, and Amanda Bynes, but like never, I was like, this is not for me. Even
though Keenan is a little older than us or our age.
I think he's right around the same age.
Probably Kel as well. I know less about him because unfortunately he did not. His star did not rise in the same way that Keenan's did. But anyway, yeah, so it is strange to think that people our age, I mean, I guess they would have been 14 in 1994, same as us.
Yeah. Yeah, no, a lot of the people certainly who are the subject of this documentary are closer to our age, but the audience they were making it for is certainly, I think, younger than us by a couple of years. We're like right on the cusp of this, though, right? So I definitely know a lot of people who I'm like friends with for whom these shows were much more relevant and sort of of their era. So Schneider, I kind of found this out today. He got the attention of Nickelodeon. I was like, where did this connective tissue happen? He co-hosted, speaking of someone that you just mentioned, co-hosted with Debbie Gibson and Brian Robbins the 1988 Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards. So
because kids were watching Head of the Class. I think we can all agree that 10, 11, and 12-year-olds, that was their target audience.
It was.
It was not. No, that was not. It was not. That show was. It wasn't.
Well, I was in what? I was in like 4th and 5th grade. I was watching Head of the Class, and I was watching Nickelodeon for sure.
That doesn't mean it was you were their target audience for sure.
No.
I've rewatched episodes of Head of the Class, and those are not jokes for children. And I'm not saying children can't get it and enjoy it, but that was more of like a Welcome Back Kotter vibe, which is also like not a show for children just because it's set in school.
No,
but yeah, so I do find it interesting that Nickelodeon plucked Schneider and Robbins. And I didn't read anything about Robin, so I don't know how he became what he is now. And if we want to say what he's doing now, which is pretty incredible, we can. But or save it. People are just Googling.
We can save it. Before we get into the dark stuff, I looked up the 1988 Kids' Choice Awards winners. Ready?
What were the kids choosing in 1988?
So I'm gonna tell you the categories and the nominees and see if you can guess who won what. Okay. Favorite movie: Beverly Hills Cop 2, Adventures,
a classic children's movie.
Adventures in Babysitting, La Bamba.
Okay. Obviously, I want to choose Adventures in Babysitting, but that feels too obvious. So I'm going to go with Beverly Hills Cop 2 because
it is Beverly Hills Cop 2. Good job.
I guess I don't know what the Kids' Choice Awards are. I guess the kids are choosing. That part I get. It's in the name.
Yeah.
But I guess I thought they were choosing things that their parents weren't watching. I don't
know.
I don't understand.
Definitely watched all these things. All right, favorite movie actor: Patrick Swayze, Dirty Dancing; Arnold Schwarzenegger, The Running Man. What the fuck?
What a weird choice. I mean, I want to say Arnold Schwarzenegger, but not for The Running Man.
Right, wouldn't be for The Running Man.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Eddie Murphy.
I guess I should have known it would have followed the best picture win.
This is so wild. Ready? Favorite movie actress: Elizabeth Shue, Adventures in Babysitting. Shelley Long. Hello again.
Speaking of, honestly, wait, I love that movie. I don't want to take us on a detour, but I love that movie so much.
Whoopi Goldberg, Fatal Beauty.
I've never heard of Fatal Beauty. Okay, I guess I'll just, what was the first one again?
Elizabeth Shue, Adventures in Babysitting.
Oh, Elizabeth Shue?
It's Whoopi Goldberg. This is so fucking wild. Okay.
First
here's a couple of my favorites.
It's Whoopi Goldberg and Jumping Jack Flash. I don't know what everybody's talking about.
Yeah. Okay, ready? This gets it gets better. Favorite TV show: The Cosby Show, Growing Pains, Alf.
It better be Alf.
It's fucking Alf. Of course, it's Alf.
Yeah, it's got to be Alf.
Favorite TV actress.
And then later, Permanent Midnight was nominated at a Kids' Choice Awards, which the kids they loved Alf. They loved Permanent Midnight, the movie based loosely on the creator of Alf.
The strung out creator of Alf. Favorite TV actress: Tempest Bledsoe, The Cosby Show, and Shadeen, Alf. Alyssa Milano, Who's the Boss?
Alyssa Milano. Everybody
You got it. You're going to like the next one. You ready? Favorite TV actor: Bill Cosby, The Cosby Show. Kirk Cameron, Growing Pains. Michael J. Fox, Family Ties.
I hope it's Michael J. Fox. I bet that's where
Two Monsters and a Michael J. Fox and Michael J. Fox.
Yeah, well, those kids were choosing a rabid conservative, a Republican. Alex P. Keaton would have voted for. Actually, he wouldn't have voted for Donald Trump. Let me say this: Alex P. Keaton might have been a Republican, but he was not a
never
crazy
Trumper
person.
Yeah.
Anyway,
all right, almost done. Favorite male vocalist: The Monkees, The Fat Boys, Bon Jovi.
The Fat Boys.
It's Bon Jovi. Favorite female vocalist: Madonna, The Bangles, Janet Jackson.
Madonna.
Of course. Favorite
I
song?
like Janet Jackson, if given my choice in that.
Favorite song: Control, Janet Jackson. I Want to Dance with Somebody, Whitney Houston. La Bamba, Los Lobos.
I Want to Dance with Somebody? That's a weird one.
Yeah.
It's like the most kids friendly. Was that right? No.
No, it's La Bamba. I can tell you from experience, like, I was singing La Bamba all the time in 1988, so that makes sense. Um,
Para bailar la bamba.
Favorite male athlete: Walter Payton, Hulk Hogan, Michael Jordan.
Oh my god. Okay, so this was wait, was this the height of Jordan's Lakers?
Sure
By the way,
was. Sure
Greg, if you're
was.
listening, you'll know that answer maybe.
Sure was.
I want to say Michael Jordan because it was the height of his fame, but Hulk
Yeah,
Hogan is such a kid-friendly guy,
it's
which
Hulk
sounds
Hogan.
gross.
You got
Yeah,
it.
that's what I thought.
Uh, yeah, it does sound gross, especially for
So
this
sorry.
episode.
This is so sorry.
Favorite
I'm so
female
sorry.
favorite female athlete: Chris Evert, Christy Phillips, Debbie Thomas.
I'm afraid I only know Chris Everett. So I'm
Me
just,
too.
even
I
though
have no
it's not
idea who
Chris
those people
Everett.
are.
So
It's not.
I'm going to say Chris Everett, but I know it's not because no one cares
It's
about.
it's it's Debbie Thomas. Favorite sports team: San Francisco Giants, the Detroit Pistons, the Chicago Bears. What
The
the
kids'
fuck?
choice, I'm sorry, is all over the place. I
It
don't
is.
these kids, we can't let them choose. I'm now a like kid. Where's kids pro life?
Yeah,
I need I can't have a kid's choice anymore. I need a
yeah.
kid's life.
Kids, yeah. Kids
Kids'
anything.
life. I can't have this. We've got to take away their rights to choose. These are
All right.
terrible. Isolate that. Isolate that sentence.
Who's the favorite team?
Bears. The
You got it. It's
Bears.
the Bears. It's the Bears.
The
Yeah.
Bears.
So this is
I
what
have to
Dan
assume all
Schneider
these
was
children are
presenting.
watching Saturday Night Live, by the way.
I gotta say, like, I was like, yeah, I watched that. Yeah, I watched Dirty Dancing, but when it
I mean,
came
I'm
out,
not saying I didn't watch things. I remember like watching Tales from the Crypt or Tales from
yeah,
the, like, Freddy Krueger's beautiful, ill-fated television show. But like, these are weird. These are weird. These are weird choices.
yes,
This is like when I was for my I think it was my ninth birthday. My birthday's in February. That means I've always had to have some sort of indoor birthday party. It's been a curse. I never got to
hmm
have fun outside for my birthday. So we had a slumber party. We went to the movies, and somehow everything was sold out. And the only movie me and my other 9-year-old friends could watch was The Dream Team, which is that Michael Keaton movie about how they're in an insane asylum with Christopher Lloyd, and they
Oh
get let
yeah,
out for the day
yeah,
to go to a baseball game, and then they get
sure,
lost in the city for a night. These four, their words,
yeah,
not mine, their word, lunatics.
yeah.
9-year-olds just like, this is a great movie for us. So anyway, that's how that feels like. Like all of the Kids' Choice kids accidentally went to a movie because all the other movies were sold out. And that
I
movie
think
was
so,
Beverly Hills
and
Cop 2.
I will say that this was the second ever Kids Choice Awards. I think they're still working out exactly like how to have awards for
So were they
kids.
doing Slime yet? Who
I
knows?
think they were
There's
doing Slime. I'm sure they were doing Slime. Slime
probably
goes all the way
because
back to You Can't Do That on
you can't do
Television.
that on television, which is
Yeah.
how I watched Nickelodeon.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Or
yeah, me too.
like I
Yes.
didn't even actually watch Hey Dude or any of those shows. I watched
Wow.
like You Can't Do That on Television and
And
then
Danger Mouse.
reruns, and this doesn't count, on Nick at Night. I didn't really watch
Yeah,
Nickelodeon ever, but I did
yeah.
watch
I
a
watched a bunch of
lot
Nick
of
at Night.
Green Acres, Bewitched, I Dream of Jeannie
Dennis
on
the
Nick at Night.
Menace. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're original.
Yep. Yep. So anyway, that's how Dan Schneider gets involved with Nickelodeon, and then again in 1993, all that premieres, and it launches the careers of people like Kenan Thompson, who is the longest tenured cast member on Saturday Night Live in history, and he's still on it. It's been like 47 years that he's been on that show.
Mhm.
And eventually, also later on, Amanda Bynes, and then also a bunch of other kids whose lives were apparently ruined in the
Yeah.
process. But it's the focus of this documentary is really, I think, mostly two people in terms of the
I think it's
kids,
actually
Amanda
the
Bynes.
failings of Nickelodeon, the network,
Well,
and
sure, yes,
as demonstrated by these 3 different individuals who were working at
yeah,
the network and at one point together on the same shows. A little bit of overlap for all 3 of them, I think.
mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Um, yeah. But in terms of like the lens that it's told through, it's basically through Amanda Bynes, or who's not doesn't even appear in the documentary, but is talked about quite a bit, and
She's
then
a
also
little bit of it, but then they switch over to Drake
to
Bell,
Drake Bell in
and
the
he
last two
gets
episodes.
because he's
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting because the way that this kind of contrasts with The Orange Years, which is a documentary about Nickelodeon that came out a couple years ago that's very good, but kind of stops here. Like it kind of stops at Dan Schneider. Like it doesn't really go into those years. It's sort of like the Hour era of Nickelodeon. And you don't get the sense that this is a very sort of badly run organization that fails children regularly, from that documentary. Maybe this is something that escalated, and with whoever was in charge in the mid to late 90s. I don't know, but I mean, of course, there's also just like the whole the problematic world of like children stars and performers
Yeah.
anyway, and just like
Well,
how
I don't
very
think
careful you have to be.
no one knew, obviously. Like, no one felt comfortable enough to say anything to Dan Schneider about how his behavior, and I guess we could just reference some of the things he did,
Yeah,
because there are, and maybe we shouldn't compare, his stuff was not as aggressive as another gentleman who, the one who ended up sexually abusing Drake Bell. That
right.
man's name is Brian Peck.
Brian
Regrettable
Beck.
name
Yep.
given the circumstances. But
Hmm.
Dan Schneider was toxic in these, I would almost say, sometimes overt, but more like uh, not playful, but do you know what I mean? Like just sort of manipulative, gross, weird, and disgusting. And then stuff that you couldn't exactly say is bad, but you knew was not okay. Your feeling was that this is not okay, but you could never
Yeah,
say, "Hello, police. I think this is a cum shot," but
yeah,
it's not. But I think
yeah,
it is, and it's like, well,
yeah,
that sort of thing, which when put all together in like a file looks very, very bad. But taken over the course of many years is just
yeah,
yada yada yada.
yeah. I like, one of the things that frustrated me about the documentary about just sort of the way it's told is, and I think that they were trying to get a lot done and cover a lot of ground, and I think some of it was done very well, some of it not so much. um but what you're saying there, I think, like, in thinking back on it, right, I'm kind of, this is where I kind of want a deeper investigation into, which is that obviously Dan Schneider is a narcissist and manipulative and deeply misogynistic. And
Yeah, I would say that's his biggest, because he was
the misogyny part.
I would say that was the most aggressive one, like
Yeah.
being sort of yelling at the children or whatever is obviously not good. But
Yeah.
the real aggression came in the form of these two, the only two women writers on the show who, first and foremost, they were getting paid as if they were one writer, which,
Right.
we call that the hosting the Oscars effect.
Yeah.
Or hosting, and or like, headlining any comedy show. I can't tell you how many times a comedy show is somehow co-headlined, as if such a thing can be possible, by two women.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
a classic
Yep.
move in entertainment, or in the workforce in general. But anyway, the things that he did and said to these two women in particular was so upsetting.
Yeah.
I Yeah. And there's this scene, I don't want to jump around, but like something that just stuck out at me because I watched the last episode literally 10 minutes ago. Is
Hmm.
It was iCarly is one of his last shows, if not the last show that he worked on or created with them. And that was when he started filming things, because the internet, the digital age was really coming about. And he pans across the iCarly writers room briefly, and it's all white men. And I
Hmm.
thought, it's really disgusting and weird that a bunch of white men are writing a show that's about teen girls. This is gross and weird. And there was everything that I always felt really grossed out every time they would cut to Dan Schneider in these videos of him on set laughing at things. And I'm sorry, if you're at that age, children's jokes shouldn't be funny too. There's nothing funny. I can't even hang out with a 25-year-old. Okay. Dan Schneider's in his 30s, possibly 40s at that point, writing jokes that 13, 14, 15-year-olds are saying, and then laughing uproariously. Like, God, that was good. I'm like, it's not though. And maybe
Yeah.
I'm wrong. Maybe you have to have that sense of humor to obviously write for children, but it just seemed so weird.
Yeah, it does. And none of it's like, that's not illegal, right? Like,
No.
and this is where it sort of, to me, gets really weird and murky, and where I think there needs to be a lot more sort of intelligent conversation about this, right? Because like not he's gross. It's very clear that there is some like unresolved childhood issues going on there, where he is, like whatever that he needs control, and he has deeply weird feelings about women and teenagers and whatever, and a foot fetish apparently, and whatever else, right?
Yeah.
No, again, none of that stuff is illegal. Some of it maybe should be, or at least better regulated, right, in industries. What I kind of want to understand more, and where I was left very frustrated by this documentary, is like there's two active pedophiles who are working on these shows, who violate, children, right, by way of these shows. And it seemed to basically suggest that Dan Schneider, while not directly responsible for these things and not himself accused of pedophilia, although certainly demonstrating very like inappropriate sort of relationships with children and boundaries with children, like nothing that would cross any kind of legal line. My question is, like, what are you trying to say about the relationship between these two things? Like, what
I
can
don't
we
think they
learn?
were
Like,
trying
what's
to draw a
useful?
relationship at all.
Well,
I think that
right.
was I
This is
think
what I
that's why
mean.
I'm saying it was speaking to the toxicity of Nickelodeon in general, and
Right.
just saying these 3 individuals were working on this program. We've never heard a peep about it from Nickelodeon. And maybe when Brian Peck was fired, there was something in the news from them, but I don't think so.
So you think
But
it's a
I
higher up
really
issue? You think it's
I
an
I think
organizational
it's a
issue?
this man's making us a lot of money, Dan Schneider, so we
Yeah.
don't care about his behavior on set. But I also think, again, no one had access to anybody above Dan, and they never could say anything to Dan. Everybody was very afraid of this man. I
Yeah.
doubt anybody knew until things started coming out in 2018, when he was officially when Nickelodeon severed ties with him. But I
Mhm.
don't know if they were trying to make a connection, just paint a full picture of Nickelodeon itself at that time. It just so happened that these 3 people all worked on the same shows, because their abuse differs. Well, like Dan's is more verbal and misogynistic. The massages are gross, but, and this is not a defense, at one point, we finally hear at the very end a woman who's shrouded in darkness, who was a costume designer, says it was usually the costume designers he was asking for a massage. Maybe one of the
Mhm.
children said something about that, but again, this is not in defense of Dan Schneider, but I think it's important to note that at least low bar, he's asking the adults for a massage, even if that's grossly inappropriate in the workplace. I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm not trying to throw him a bone. I just think it's important to have whatever the facts are. But then the other two, one was a gay man who was sexually abusing a young boy, and the other was a pedophile who understood he was a pedophile, so much so that he was writing about it in his own diaries and chose
Yeah.
not to do anything about it.
Yeah.
Awful.
Yeah.
It's weird. I mean, it's not weird because this was a show uh, for children. This was a network for children, so of course they all found their way there, those two. But boy, I was mad the whole
Yeah,
time.
I mean, I guess my question for you is, do you think that is Dan Schneider the center of gravity here? Do these two people end up with these jobs on these shows without the sort of Dan Schneiderized version of Nickelodeon?
Oh,
Or
I don't think that has anything to do with it. I really,
okay,
really don't. I think it's two people who want access to children, and a place to do that is, of course, a network that's built on children's programming, the same
right,
way that school teachers or priests or anyone,
sure,
and also it's like any sort of position of authority. It's just, so again, I don't. Dan Schneider's bad, but I think, like you, this is gonna sound terrible, because the other two men, is the one guy's name, it's not Jack Handy, because I'm getting SNL in my
no,
mind.
it's
Something Handy.
Is it
Jason?
Jason? I think it's Jason
Jason Handy?
Handy.
Also, another regrettable name. Jason Handy and Brian Peck.
Yeah,
Please,
yeah, I
but
know.
I can't. It's self-fulfilling.
Yeah.
But I forgot where my train of thought was. Oh, I know what I was gonna say. I'm sorry. I thought it was less clear what Dan Schneider did, or they were unable to build if they were trying to build a case against him. The case is
Yeah,
that this is not a good man and he was not a great boss and he was very toxic and at times verbally abusive. And of course, that's all very bad. But juxtaposed against two actual abusers who ended up both going to prison, not together, but separately, is like
yeah,
it. Unfortunately, if you're me, you find yourself going, well, I don't understand what Dan Schneider did because these guys are so bad. What is going on with Dan
yeah,
Schneider that we're
yeah,
it's unfortunately just sort of aren't and obviously the actors themselves are saying we did not like working with Dan. It was traumatic. And everyone they interviewed from like a camera operator again to the costume designer, everyone said it was an abusive, toxic workplace. I've been in an abusive, toxic workplace. I understand that feeling and it's awful, awful,
yep,
awful. Um But the other situation was so much worse that it was like a little bit of whiplash when you go from this guy to a guy, again, Handy, God damn it,
yeah.
who police later found Ziploc baggies of little girls' underwear in his home when they, yeah. Mm.
This is my problem too, and I think this is kind of what I was trying to get at earlier, which is that. So I think first of all we should say this that like this is not an HBO documentary. This is a Discovery.
Investigation,
Yeah,
Discovery,
ID. It's an ID
Discovery, Warner
documentary.
Brothers, don't get it twisted. So
Yeah,
you're going to
so
get that
for those of
level.
you being like, this is not the standards of HBO, like, no, it's not, and you can tell by the commercial breaks or where they should slot in. Those
Although
of
I
you who are
will say
watching.
for Investigation Discovery, this was pretty respectful and
Agreed,
thorough.
agreed.
Gone are the days,
Yeah,
however much I missed the shows like Wives with Knives, and boy, do I
yeah.
ever.
Well, they're still
This
on.
is oh, I
Still
know
got
they
this
are.
stuff, but
Twisted Sisters, hosted by
yeah,
Khloe Kardashian, which it was.
stats. Yeah.
But yeah, so this was pretty good
It
for
was,
them.
and I think I think a lot of the journalists they talked to were great. I think a lot of the interview subjects were great. I think a lot of it was handled very, very well. I think my problem was exactly what you're saying is that there wasn't really a thesis here, and I was like, by the time I got to episode 4, I'm like, well, how bad is Dan Schneider really? And like, where are you drawing? What are you trying to teach me? Where are you drawing the parallel here? Like, what is the teachable moment from all of this? And I feel like that got lost. I feel like by the second episode, you're like, Dan Schneider's a monster. And then by the 4th episode, you're like, oh, yeah, I guess he sucks and did a lot of shitty things and did a lot of
Yeah.
things poorly and like really fucked over a lot of people and shouldn't really be working in this industry and needs a shitload of therapy. But like, that's not what this is about, I guess, anymore, which
No.
is a very strange kind of
And it's also like,
approach.
and I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about this because he's already been punished, but it's also like, well, the man has been removed and he's not doing anything anymore. So was the purpose of this to just be like, hey, remember this? Or maybe the people involved really felt like they needed to tell their story. And again, I'm not saying keep it
Mm.
under wraps, it already happened, but it is a little like it'd be one thing if he suffered no consequences and now we're just left wondering, you know, but eventually Nickelodeon severed ties with him and now as far
Well,
as
or
I
did
know he's
they?
not
Right? I
he
mean,
did
he's
he did one other thing for them and that ended I think in March something 20
like
I'm
recently, right? I
yeah.
believe I read in Distractify by someone named Dan Schneider
Yeah.
that
If I wrote it, it's true. If I wrote it, I also forgot about it the second I
no,
hit
that he kind
send.
of that he worked on a show for a few years for Nickelodeon. He wasn't like the showrunner. He wasn't, like the kingmaker anymore, but they're still using his writing
Well,
from
that I will say is this is just a theory that I'm going to tie back to his very good friend Brian Robbins, who
Oh,
again
let's talk about Brian Robbins then.
was on head of the
Yeah.
class with him and is now, as of press time, the president and CEO of Paramount. Is it Networks, Pictures, and Nickelodeon?
Yeah.
So Brian Robbins is very powerful.
Yep.
We see him a couple of times, sort of in the background of this documentary, but I find it very strange that Dan Schneider's relationship with the now head of this network, and I don't know his trajectory, so I don't know. At one point, Dan Schneider refers to him as the executive producer of one of the shows. I think it might have been the Amanda Show, maybe not. I
Mhm.
can't remember which
I
one.
think that's right.
And I haven't looked at his Wikipedia page. I don't know if it actually has his resume on there, but now he is the top dog, big guy. He's the diamond dog. Sorry, Ted Lasso. So I'm sure that the only reason why Dan Schneider is able to do some more work for that network is because one of his very good friends is the decision maker.
Yeah.
Probably.
Uh,
This
that
is
would
a
make a lot of
theory.
sense. I mean,
Lawyers.
they did host the 1988 Kids' Choice Awards together, and who could forget the moment that you opened that envelope and said Alf? So, these are the moments that bond people. They bond human beings
Did
together.
Gordon Shumway accept the award?
Yeah, I mean, probably. Yeah.
Mm.
With the big Hulk Hogan over Michael Jordan upset of '88, these are the
I mean, they
moments
must the
where,
kid I would have been ripping my tank top off in
oh yeah,
joyous celebration.
yeah, must have been wild. I'm sure like four celebrities were there. You know what I mean? Like it was back in those days where the
Nobody
one
understood what
celebrity
it
who
was.
shows up just accepts the award for everybody. But
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody has a VHS tape of the 1988
Yeah.
Kids Choice Awards.
I mean, it might be
Um,
somewhere. I also thought
that's pretty
something
good.
that I thought was strange was that there was nothing definitive said about Amanda Bynes except for the fact that she sometimes spent a lot of time with him.
Yes.
And I was like, I think the reason why they've decided to obviously, I mean, she was, yes, the person who created who in this situation, but because her fall from grace has been so public and well
Yeah.
documented, and she's still seemingly maybe not doing okay. I've been watching her Instagrams lately because I've had to write about her, and
Hmm.
I don't know, she doesn't seem okay, but I also don't ever take Instagram stories as some sort of, fact. But I think used they mentioned her because they had to, but they didn't have anything to say really about Amanda Bynes.
Right.
Probably A, because she didn't
Agreed. Yeah.
choose to participate, but the only stories they had were she spent a lot of time behind closed doors with him. And then they're like, but look at her now, as if to say it was probably because she was spending a lot of times in a office with Dan Schneider, I guess. Is that what you're suggesting? I don't know. I don't know. I was unclear about Amanda Bynes. I think they
And
should have
again, right. Yes.
left her alone.
That to me was part of the problem with like not having a clear thesis here, that it's like her relationship with her parents seems a little fucked up and not healthy. She is spending too much time with this person. Is it because she sees him as a father figure? What was their relationship like? I think
It
it
was probably he sees me as an adult even though I'm not, and he probably
Yep.
shouldn't be treating me as such, and I wanna hang around with an adult who can is putting me on this television show who doesn't treat me like I'm a child, which kids
Yes.
love. Kids
Yeah.
love to not be treated like they are children, sadly.
I will say it was effective, at least in reminding me, or at least sort of reiterating, the sense that I got from the time, from what little I did see of those sketch shows and the Amanda Show, whatever, how like supremely talented she
Oh
was.
god, yes.
And
Oh
I do
god,
think it
yes.
it 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 also, I think it effectively kind of builds a tragedy that we lost this like very, very talented, like who's someone who
Yeah.
should be on SNL like at this point, or like that should have been her sort of trajectory at some point. Because she had to do some very like broad comedy that frankly was kind of even beneath her. Like she was better than a lot of that material.
Yeah.
But when you see what she does with the material and the her timing and her juxtapositions, like it's so good. Her comedy was fantastic. And yeah, it
Yes.
sucks that we fucked her up, and she still seems that she's struggling, which
Well, here's what I think happened to Amanda Bynes, and I really maybe this is, all conjecture. Um, this part's true. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder,
sure.
which usually symptoms like that begin to present themselves when you're in your 20s, sometimes sooner, but in your early to mid 20s, which is when things started to fall apart for her. So I actually
Yep.
don't think that what happened to her, what's going on with her, has really anything to do too much with her time
Makes
on the
sense.
show. I
Yeah.
don't want to say she wasn't abused, but still. And probably just the fact that she is a person who suffers from a debilitating mental illness and has had to be committed at least once because she didn't want to take her medication. And I'm sure we all know someone I have a friend of mine who has bipolar disorder, and I've sat with him when he's decided to go off his meds and has had what I refer to as episodes, and it's pretty intense. So I'm not going to suggest that it's the same for her, but it's it's definitely something to consider when thinking about what's going on with her, is that this is a person who had a debilitating mental illness. And I'm just not sure if it's this, if the trauma is the number one thing
Yeah,
for her.
I don't think necessarily, like, and again, I think that the documentary kind of
But they
points to
didn't
some
even mention
places.
that. They don't even say
No,
that she has bipolar. It's very strange. Like, you have to give
that's
people
true.
all the facts. It's very bizarre not to
It's
mention.
true.
And by the way, they're letting you think that everything that has happened to her since then is probably because of whatever happened at Nickelodeon, without
Right.
giving you all the facts, which is, and
Right.
also she has an incredibly debilitating mental illness that requires
Right.
medication. That's important.
Yeah. And are they like allowed? Are they even allowed to say
It's
that? It's
public. People wrote about it.
I guess so. Yeah.
I mean, she was committed. 5150.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about a Ford truck. That's
I
right.
do think, I mean, I do think she, like, I don't think the documentary suggests that this was all, that's what caused it. I do think it is suggesting, and I think rightly, that like she was failed by grown-ups who should have been looking out for her best interests and like pretty much never were. And that, yeah, that can't help, right? When you are someone who is struggling with mental illness and you are a teenager and you are, constantly being pulled into, it's a difficult profession, especially like for a child, and like for a child who is also developing bipolar symptoms. Like, yeah, of course you need really, really, really responsible people who care first about you and your health, and second about like the fact that you're a cash cow for their corporation. And usually it's the other one that takes the preference. So
Yeah.
yeah, that sucks. I don't know very much about Drake Bell. I knew the name. I knew Drake and Josh existed. I'm kind of more familiar with Josh Peck as someone who is like asshole coded to me. Like, he's someone
Yeah.
who I think a lot of
Although he
people
has
hate.
since said something about the documentary after people were like,
Okay.
but
Okay. I
also
just I, I just
don't
know him as
yell
a
at
guy people
people.
people all like suck, you
Yeah.
know.
I mean, Drake Bell had to make a video that was like, "Can you guys leave Josh alone?"
Oh, really?
There's a
Okay.
certain amount of ownership, and this is a true crime documentary, obviously, to be clear,
Sure. Yeah.
that weirdos of that fans of that genre, and boy,
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
love true crime, but I don't love it in the intense way that is like living on a message board, wanting to solve my small town's
You're not an
unsolved
internet sleuth?
murder.
Yeah,
No,
sure.
and that thing doesn't exist. You're not
I
doing
know.
research, baby, you're Googling. I can
Yeah.
make a FOIA request. Anyone can do that.
True.
That's why it's the Freedom of Information Act. But
Mhm.
anyway,
Yep.
I digest and digress. Uh, yeah, so poor Drake Bell, one of the real victims, is just like, "Hey guys, can you guys leave Josh Peck alone and just stop showing up in his comments?" But also, if you want to go over to James Marsden's comments, which I did today, they are all lit up with people being like, "What the fuck, you piece of shit!" And then we had to lose one of Hollywood's greats. But I guess we'll get to that in a
I
second.
I I wanna get back, yeah, I'll get to that because 'cause I'm pissed off about how they handled that too,
I
but
I feel sad.
yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, Drake Bell, yeah, again, way after my time. He's
Yeah.
probably in his mid to late 30s, I think. I would assume right
Mhm.
now.
Mhm.
Um, and of course, he had a situation of his own later with, as an adult, exchanging inappropriate text messages or inappropriately texting I think she was 15 years old. I also watched for work a bit of when she went to court. She did it over Zoom, and she alleged things during her, I think it might have been her victim impact statement. When she did it, she was 19 at the time, so they could show her face.
Yeah.
This victim of his that he had been sending inappropriate text messages, she said that there was physical assault. He was never charged with that, never found guilty with that. That was never, it was just the text messages. But in her statement, she said, "I was 15 years old and you digitally penetrated me in the back of a car." I'll say allegedly for the sake of any lawyers listening. And
Okay.
then I only bring that up because a lot of people were screaming, "Oh, and then you went ahead and did the same thing to someone else." And I'm not gonna fault people for not knowing that many victims of abuse often grow up to become abusers themselves.
Absolutely. Yep.
And I'm not a mental health professional, but I do have so much therapy inside of me. Again, I'm not one. But I just know that's a pattern. That's kind of how that happens. And I'm not saying
Yeah.
we should forgive him for that, but I think it's important to have that
Yeah.
understanding without just thinking that Drake Bell's just a hypocrite, question mark. I don't know what they want from this poor man. I mean, people are finicky and ridiculous in true crime.
I'm not here to defend that or him in any way.
No.
I also know people who are victims of childhood sexual abuse who become themselves abusers. Like
Yep.
I've seen it in IRL. I will at least credit him with saying that he acknowledged it in the documentary and that he is obviously like his response to it was to seek a great deal of help and like and
Yes.
to right and like he did the right thing like after the fact he sort of again none of this is to dismiss anything that he did and like that should all be adjudicated properly and everything else um but he is not sort of he didn't like deny it and just sort of run away from it and has decided to like seek help for it, which is the only thing that you can do at that point. You serve
Yeah.
whatever legal consequences that come your way and then you seek help, and that is what he appears to be doing. So good for him. This guy Brian Peck, one of the people that he is associated with, who comes up in the documentary, who needs his own separate documentary because this is a whole different ball game, is of course Brian Singer.
Oh,
If
yeah.
those of you guys don't know the whole story with Brian Singer, it is wild and horrifying. But
Birds of a
he's
fucking feather, I
yeah
swear to God.
he's in that crowd now. Again, one of the things that it briefly alludes to that I think is a much more interesting story here and needs more exploration is the way that Brian Peck hid behind being a gay man in the 90s.
Oh, yeah,
And
claiming homophobia, if anyone dare
yeah, yeah,
suggest anything, which is, come
yep,
on, my guy. You're doing a disservice to everyone, especially your community in those
sure.
situations by kind of leaning into this already just horrifying
But it's also, I think, a
stereotype.
testament, and this is not to blame everybody else, but it's also, I think, reinforces, why openness and tolerance and acceptance of people is important and why like not creating marginalized communities, right? Like the fact that in the 90s being an out gay man was a very different experience than it is today, and like it still sucks today like in plenty of ways, right? But like in the 90s it was different. um
Especially in the early 90s because the AIDS
yeah.
epidemic, which people have
Yes.
like was peak in like late 80s, early 90s. That was as bad as it could get. So there all of that was also happening
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
background for any gay man.
Bigotry allows people to like manipulate it to their own advantages if they want to, right? I mean, like it's it is we see it all the time, and this is part of the issue with like having a massively bigoted culture that you can have someone like Brian Peck who can be like, oh, he just hates me because I'm homosexual and he thinks I'm coming on to him. And, you know, it's all a big misunderstanding. He just doesn't understand how I work. And like that seems to be the line that he basically presented to everybody. And I think pretty convincingly, because this seems to be like a very charismatic, very sort of, again, manipulative person who knew how to con and play people, including Joanna Kearns. And like, I get it. Like there
Sweet and beautiful Joanna
it
Kearns.
really pissed me off that they used Joanna Kearns and James Marsden, especially Will Friedle and Ryder Strong, in this documentary to be like, they did statements of support for him. And I'm like, can you give some context to this? Because this needs a lot more context than what you are giving. Like, this is not okay.
Yes. Well, we know from is it Friedel? Was it
Friedle,
Friedel?
yeah.
And Ryder Strong, who
Yep. Yep.
I suspect were reached out for comment and then quickly recorded an episode of their podcast, which that's fine. They had many, many years to say, we made an oopsie, we did this thing. Now, of course, the letters, see, there were, what did the Business Insider woman say? I think 41 letters of support or something like that were written for Brian
Mm,
Peck. There were
yeah.
family members, there were obviously friends. She was very clear, nobody from Nickelodeon, and Dan Schneider did not. And I do want to say another thing, is I think it's always important. Drake Bell also said Dan Schneider was incredibly kind to him. And
Yep.
I think that matters.
Yep.
Like, I don't think,
Yep.
I'm not
Agreed.
here to create a narrative about Dan Schneider. He also was very kind to Drake Bell during this time, who was the only person he told was Dan Schneider at first, for his parents, I think, or after everything. Anyway, but like, so these letters were unsealed for the sake of this documentary. And,
Yeah.
we just went through this with Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis and Danny Masterson. So, especially on the heels of that little campaign,
Sure.
you have people who are doing this under, a little bit of it is that it is going to be sealed, and you probably think it's never going to come back to bite you. And so sometimes I wonder, looking at these, it's like, yeah, but you're also, you think you're safe from anyone knowing that you tried to help your friend. Because even though Brian Peck didn't, according to Will and Ryder Strong, expressly say to them, here's what happened, he also said, I was trapped. This boy came on to me, which I'm so sorry. What a crazy sentence.
Yeah.
And Wilfred and Ryder Strong were like, of course you were. Of course this 15-year-old came on to you, Brian.
Well, okay.
That's what he told them. And they went, God, of course, what a lying little.
So I will also say this, like, they were both very upfront about the fact that when Brian Peck was a guest on Boy Meets World, because they recorded an episode of Pod Meets World about Brian Peck a few months ago when the episode that he was on came up in their rewatch. And they talked about the fact that Brian Peck groomed them both, and that they didn't even realize it until sort of much later on, that like that's what was going on, because they just didn't have the context for it, the language for it. Like, nobody knew how to protect them from him. But he was doing the same shit, like inviting him to their parties, to his parties, and like all this bullshit. And they were like, and they always saw him as this like cool dude who was a gay man, so they don't have to be afraid of him because, like he's like he's harmless because, and all of his like eccentric sort of weird behavior toward them, they would write off as like not knowing how to navigate
Well,
what it is to be hanging out with a
what's
gay
her
adult
name?
man.
Didn't Topanga say, what's her name? Danielle
Then
Fisher,
official. Yeah.
Official,
Yeah.
specifically bring up the thing about saying we didn't want to. She just mentioned being invited out to things. And I think she
Yep.
said, when I didn't listen to the podcast, I read a transcript. She was the one who said, we also thought if we were made it seem weird, even if it was weird that an adult man would want to hang out with children. She said what you already talked about, what we already said.
Yeah.
We were afraid it would look homophobic.
Yep.
Now, I
Absolutely.
do wonder if he made that suggestion or they just kind of made that leap themselves. But yeah,
I
so
think so. Like, and again, I don't know much about Marsden's story here, but I can't imagine that he, again, the sort of way that we dealt with like gay men in the 1990s,
but
like
this wasn't
culturally.
about dealing with a gay man in the 1990s. He literally said, and the language was the same in every letter, Brian has suffered enough. They all said, Brian has suffered
Yes,
enough.
because
Brian has suffered.
I don't know the context, so I'm not trying to defend anybody here, but I do see a realistic sort of narrative where they genuinely, because they just don't understand, they genuinely just think like some homophobic kid is trying to get him in trouble because they're gay bashing, and that was a pretty reasonable thing to think,
But this
right?
was
Like
after he
in
was
the
found
1990s.
guilty. So either they believe due process or they don't
Right.
believe due process. Because there was obviously, they were not writing letters before the trial. This
Yeah.
was to help with his sentencing. They were
Yeah.
trying to get him a lenient, they were trying to get leniency. I can't talk. So this was after all the evidence was presented
Yeah.
and a court of law said he did these horrific things. And when Drake Bell tells the story of being it was him and his mother and his brother on one side of the courtroom and a sea of fucking celebrities
I
next to
know.
Brian Peck.
I
I
know.
mean, at that point, you must know what he's been found guilty of, and you're still putting pen to paper.
But you have to assume they also don't believe it, right? And
But
that's not
that's
to forgive them for
shitty.
not believing
That's
it. I
on
know it
them. I'm
sucks. It sucks.
sorry.
I know
That's
it
on
is.
the
I know.
that's on them. There's no reason why this kid who was if his career, look, it's one thing if Drake Bell was in the middle of a flailing career and he was trying to get something out of it, but he was one of Nickelodeon's
Yeah.
top talent at the time. He was at the height of his fame with that network. Why would he choose to torpedo his career like this? Which I don't think, but like it just doesn't make any sense. I don't want to give them any grace. I'm tired of giving assholes grace. James Marsden, you're dead to me. That's a fun joke.
Oh
You were on that
no.
show.
Oh,
You know, you can Sonic yourself right out of here, buddy. Got you
oh
where
my
I want you.
goodness.
No
Oh my goodness.
thanks. I was
Oh my
going to go through
goodness.
all of his shit. And
Yeah.
his comment section, people are pissed. And here's what's
Yeah.
happening. Say something, James. Say
Yeah. He
something.
definitely, yes. I'm
You
surprised
need
he
to
asked.
you
I don't
need to
really
say
follow
something.
what he does
That's what's
best.
going on too.
So
Why aren't you saying
okay.
something? And if you don't think you should, that's a
Yeah.
fucking problem
Yeah,
too.
that is a problem. That's
I
a
don't know
problem.
what.
I know.
I'm
I
sure he
was
and his lawyers are scribbling furiously to save his
obviously
career.
I knew about the Will Friedle and Ryder Strong part of it, but when I heard the James Marsden, I'm like, no, like don't
I
take this from
know.
me.
He was one of the like. What
Man.
next? Is Paul Rudd's name in that stack of letters?
Yeah.
Who
Oh my
else?
god, I was getting a little worried
I-
when Joanna Kearns. I'm like, what the fuck what are you doing? Stop.
She had another growing pain. This one, it was
But
a big one.
she did rescind when she was like, I'm sorry, I didn't know what I was doing or saying or the
Yeah,
full context. And it's
yeah.
like, well, yeah, but maybe
And
just
that's
like
growth.
she's an adult
Rest is
and
pain.
like she has the resources and the like wherewithal to like
Yes, but James
investigate
Marsden was
things,
in his
whereas
20s at that point.
I know, but I guess I'm thinking more about like Ryder Strong and Will Friedle. Like that,
Okay.
that's a much more gray area.
There's this different because again, I am curious, like when they were like, and Brian Peck is
Marsden
doing
can't have been
James.
that old. He's not that old. He's like
Marsden is at least 5-6 years
50.
older than me.
Yeah,
And Brian Peck got caught in the mid 2000s, which means I don't know, that man
yeah,
was probably maybe even in his late 20s or early 30s.
yeah, maybe
Writing
okay,
that letter and being like,
yeah, yeah. Anyway, at least he got sentenced to life in prison and is never to be heard from again. Or wait, that's not what happened.
JK. Yeah.
JK.
JK,
Slap on the
JK.
wrist. And did he serve any prison time? He did.
16 months. I don't know
16
how
months.
much of it he served, if he got out for
That'll
goody good
that'll fix it.
behavior.
That'll fix it. Yeah. Famously, that's what
yeah.
fixes sexual predatory nature
Yeah.
is 16 months in
The
prison.
Daily Mail caught up with him not too long ago, and he was just like, I don't
Oh.
want to talk about this. I don't want to talk about this. Now, can I say something that I was a
Yeah.
little triggered by when Drake Bell or somebody was describing Brian Peck's house, and he talks about one of his bedrooms, or excuse me, one of his rooms, the decor of it, and then he
Right?
frames
This
this as
John
a
Wayne
bad
Gacy
thing. No, I do love he had Pogo the Clown. I can't believe they didn't say it. I kept saying, oh, it's Pogo the Clown. It's
Yeah.
Pogo the Clown. Just
Yeah.
say Pogo the Clown. It's Pogo the
Sure.
Clown.
Sure.
Not that. I mean, do I wish I had that? Of course I do. But no, he framed like maybe it wasn't Drake Bell, maybe it was somebody else, as like having all these like collector's items. Like, what kind of grown man? I'm like, a lot of grown men, a lot of grown people. I have collector's items. Like he had a bunch of Hollywood memorabilia, and they're just trying to suggest like, isn't this also weird? I'm like, no, sexually assaulting a child is fucking weird. Having Hollywood collectibles. Maybe not your favorite thing, but let's not make this thing now. Now, every time I go into a house, if someone's got like some fucking dolls in a packaging, and I know they're kind of like, I'm not gonna go, are you fucking a kid?
I've got a bunch of unopened Phantom Menace action figures, and I'm great.
John, where were you last night? That was just such a crazy. Like, don't put that into the documentary. That's not what made this guy bad. We know what made this guy bad, and it wasn't like loving Hollywood and movies.
Yeah.
Although it's getting harder and harder to breathe, but also to defend the entertainment industry. It really, my Greg and I were talking about this. My boyfriend, hi honey, about this Ouroboros. Like, does Hollywood attract a certain kind of person, or does a certain kind of person become?
Yeah.
Because and he brought up a very good point, or is it just because these are public figures that it just feels like it's more
Yep.
there than anywhere else because
Yep.
they are people that we're gonna read about, and that's probably a
Yeah,
lot
we
of it.
forget how many fucking people work at like in Hollywood. Like it's so many that it may even be the like percentage of people who are predators in Hollywood is not like that much higher than the greater population when you consider there's
Yeah,
just fucking countless goddamn people working in Hollywood. It's a
yeah,
lot. It's a lot.
but it's
There's a
just
reason
but
why
they're
you
the
skip
ones we're
through all
gonna
those
write about.
credits at the end, because the best boy grips out there aren't
Oh, and
written
his name is
about in
Brian Peck. Delete.
Brian.
Delete,
God,
delete, delete.
delete,
Don't delete. Don't
delete,
delete. It's called gallows humor because we're
fix
fired
it in
up.
post.
Don't
Yeah.
fix it in post. Keep that joke in because I hate to say it. It was a good joke. Everyone
No,
listening,
that's the other thing that I worry about with stuff like this is sort of this also fuels the whole like fucking QAnon bullshit that like Hollywood's just a bunch of pedophile predators. I'm like, look, it's there. It's there because, and as you said earlier in the episode, it's there because like the same reason it's in the Catholic Church. You have access to children, and if you are a sexual predator, like this is a way of you doing that. And if there are not the safeguards in place to protect those children, like this is what's going to fucking happen, right? Children are
yeah,
there. You can get power over them. Of course, it's going to attract them. It does not mean that like Hollywood produces, pedophiles or that it is established as a place to like generate pedophilia the way that, a
yeah,
lot of right-wing conspiracy theories want you to believe. But like this kind of shit doesn't help. It just makes it really frustrating to like
yeah.
continue to kind of have it's why you have to have these conversations in these documentaries in like a really responsible way, and by and large I think this is a pretty responsible documentary. I think it
It,
does a
it it was. They got a lot of. I mean, I was very impressed by the various individuals, not just writers or people you might think are in the quote unquote upper echelon of a production, but like a camera guy. Again, the costume designer. Like people who everybody witnessed various
yeah,
forms of abuse, and I'm not talking about Brian or the PA who we didn't really talk about. I think he's still in prison
I think
for
so. He's
something,
yes.
either for that or perhaps something else happened, but I'm pretty sure that guy's still in prison. That one was awful.
Yeah, that one was terrible, and that felt like a slip through the cracks scenario, whereas Brian Peck feels like a too much and you're just turning a blind eye from it scenario.
Yeah,
I don't
I
know.
mean, I don't know because I was also very confused. First of all, anytime they like showed Brian Peck, if we got like a hint of his voice or something, I couldn't see a smidgen of a personality in this man. I don't know how
No.
this guy, how many, why so many people seem to enjoy having this man around. I couldn't see it, but yeah, I mean, and then dialogue coach, was that it, or dialect coach? I don't know what a dialogue coach is. I know what a
I think it's
dialect
I
coach
think
is.
it's
I
how
don't.
you teach children to like speak dialogue in a
I mean,
way
I
that
do
makes
also
sense.
want
I
to
don't know.
say I don't want to blame parents, but hey, parents, your dialogue coach, he's not working out of his house, and if he's working out of his house,
Yeah.
I mean, to the real hero of this documentary series for me is Drake Bell's father, who
Yes.
tried
The best. Oh my
everything
god.
he could. Let's just talk about a positive thing. Who tried
Yes.
everything he could. This man is crying on camera. He's heartbroken. He tried to save his son.
Yep.
Nobody would listen to him. Nobody
Yep.
would listen to him.
Yep. No,
Nobody.
that's very moving. The whole thing with him and his father.
And he did sit like when Drake had to go to inexplicably Brian Peck's house to work. He was like, I always made sure I was in the room with them.
Yeah.
And then once Brian Peck got his gross hooks into Drake and was whispering like, your dad's probably stealing money from you, and did what the classic predatory thing of driving a
Yep.
wedge between him and his family and his friends. Suddenly Drake is firing his father, who was his manager, and suddenly they're not on speaking terms anymore. And, he's just trying to respect his son and help his son make his dreams come true. And he probably thought he was doing what was best.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Anyways, if you loved Nickelodeon in the 2000s, sorry. I'm sure you've already watched this because
Yeah.
everybody seems to have on the internet.com, and
Yeah. It's either this or Kate
yeah,
Middleton,
it's
and
rough.
that one's been solved. So
That's been solved. It's just
case
cancer, and
closed.
suddenly we're all terrible people for
No, we're
being
not. The British
good.
royal family and their communications department is terrible. We were just
I wanna make it
reacting
clear,
to
like, none of us were mad at Kate. We were just
not at
worried she was
all.
dead. That's the problem. We
Literally
were not
nobody was angry at Kate. People are
nobody. It's so
wild
fucking
on
stupid.
this app.
I know.
I
And
mean, and
on the real
also,
world.
I think I tweeted something about like people of a certain age will remember what they did to Diana. You can read about
Yeah,
it and you can watch it on The Crown, but if you were alive when they were destroying this woman and then ultimately kind of killing her, not
literally
in a
destroying
conspiracy
her.
way,
Yeah, not in a conspiracy way.
anytime a woman in that family goes missing or something happens to them, you're just like, ugh, your
Yeah,
butthole
and
tightens up a little
there's
bit.
the recent story of one Meghan Markle, so it's sort of
Oh,
like,
heard of her.
you know?
And the British press was still trying to throw shade at Meghan Markle, somehow
Oh, they're still
involving
doing it,
her.
like, today, and
They're
it was like,
obsessed.
they're obsessed, and now they're throwing shade at, like, everybody in the world for
Us.
being like, "If Meghan
Unbelievable.
Markle had cancer, you'd be," it's like, "Shut the fuck up. Just shut up. Just shut up.
They're the worst.
Stop. Quit your life."
Get your people under control, John. This is
Sorry, yeah.
so
Anyhow,
yeah. So
alright,
do you want to talk about the end of the documentary? Because I felt they just sort of
sure.
ended it rather abruptly, unless there was more. I know we bounced around a lot, but
It just ends with Drake and his dad walking up off into the sunset, right? That's pretty much it. I mean, there's
yep.
not a lot of conclusion here. It just sort of
It's
is
just a
like,
bunch of I'm not saying I
then
need
some
a happy
words.
ending in all my
Yeah.
documentaries, but no one seems to be. I mean, Drake's doing better. Something I was confused about a little bit was the fact that Drake Bell said that he never got therapy until much later, except for the story that he tells when his girlfriend's mother is the one who figures out something is possibly going on with Brian Peck. He said that
Yes.
this woman called his mother and said, "I'm taking Drake to a therapist." I guess
Yep.
who knows why. And that was a therapist. And then we never saw that therapist again
No.
or any therapist, which I felt like, hey, parents, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Es-
Well, and he also said that he deflected to the therapist, right? That he just sort of was like, "No, everything's fine. It's fine." Like, he didn't really open up to that therapist, but
Right.
at least a grown up was like, "This child needs help." And
Why is this man in his 40s calling our house and your
yeah,
cell phone
repeatedly.
multiple times in a
Yeah.
row?
So also good job, Drake Bell's girlfriend's mom. That's good.
Yeah.
You're good too.
Yeah. Also
You're the
thrilling
hero
to see
here.
a cell phone from like the mid 2000s, a flip
I
phone
know. Yeah.
appear.
Woof.
The prop department really working overtime on that one. Loved it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but yeah, it just sort of ends with a bunch of we reached out for so and so for such and such, and this is what they said, and it doesn't really mean anything, and it's all just kind of. And
Oh,
again, I
well,
think this is
did you
my.
watch Dan Schneider's 20-minute video apology on the podcast?
I did not. I listened. I read a bunch of excerpts from it, but
Mm.
no, I did not. I did not watch
I
the apology.
mean, it's fine. It's
Yeah,
I don't think it's one of those "I'm sorry you feel that ways." He was like,
no, but it
I've
is that
learned."
like it is that I had no idea sort of vibe, which is like, yeah, you did. Like,
Yeah, don't say
that's not
that. Just
true.
say
Yeah.
sorry. I don't know if anyone out there needs any help on how apologies work. There don't doesn't need to be any buts in it, either literally
And there
or
really wasn't, but it's just like the way that he
well,
kind
we
of
don't need
phrased
the "I didn't
everything
know
was like,
anything." You don't need that. You just need to
yeah,
say, I am so sorry. I was wrong. I am so
yeah,
sorry I was wrong." And hey, here's a hot take. If you don't think you were wrong, just say you were fucking wrong. For
yeah.
sure.
Just say like, that's showbiz, kids. That's what you say.
Yeah.
You know,
And then
that's
say, "I don't know," and
Hollywood,
get
baby.
slimed. What'd you do, Dan? I don't know. Slime, 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 slime,
No.
slime. And that's how you apologize as a former Nickelodeon
Someone
creator.
comes out of a locker being like, "Hey, Dan, what'd you do wrong?"
Yes, Alistair?
Yes, Alistair. Yes,
Would you like
Moose.
some water? Water. Pfft, and then the slime is gone. It's
Yeah.
it's
How
built
much
in.
water that show wasted. My God.
It's
In
Canadian
today's
water. They
today's
can handle it. It's Canadian. They
today's
got lots
climate
more.
change world.
It's Canada.
Okay, so you want to talk about something fun to end this so that we're not
Yeah.
super
The
gross and
palate
depressing?
cleanser.
Yeah.
Over this past weekend, and this is
Yeah.
not evergreen language, I apologize. I know better.
Some weekend
Uh,
in the past when you're listening to this
a
podcast.
weekend, my boyfriend and I went to Ford's Theater. Jen, you're obsessed with
Nice.
Abraham Lincoln, you freak. To see their production of Little Shop of Horrors, and boy, was it good. Boy, was it a
Yeah.
real fun ride. I loved every second of it. I didn't realize how much of the music I knew from the movie. I had no idea it was based on an H.G. Wells book. This is
Yeah.
news to me. So obviously, I'd seen the Steve Martin, Rick Moranis motion picture from the late '80s, but
Sure.
had no idea that was based on an H.G. Wells book. So what a thrilling discovery for me. I don't know if you're in the DC area, go see it, and then you can go see the balcony, kind of where Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. Between that time and now, it burned down, so it's not the same, but you can pretend. But the theater is the original, just that Martin. Oh, and if you go, you get they have an incredible museum in Ford's Theater, and across the
You get
street
to
at the
shoot one
Peterson House
president in the head
with the
with a
gun my
mission.
family invented. You're welcome.
Mm-hmm.
But across the street is the Peterson House. It's a boarding house where Lincoln died, and they have a big museum there too. It's actually very good.
Yeah.
So that's I don't know. I talked about a gun again. I don't know. That's happy. This is all happy. That was a good weekend. We had a great weekend.
You posted that on Twitter, and I was gonna reply. Aside from that, Miss Tisdale, how was the play? You know, but
Yeah. I gave him a million little kiss.
yeah.
My obsession with Abraham Lincoln is getting weird.
Are you watching Manhunt?
Girl, you know it.
Yeah.
Not only have I read that book, I'm re-listening to it. I'm watching Manhunt, and I got the showrunner to follow me back on Instagram.
Nice.
I don't like to brag.
What do you?
It's
What do you
very
think?
good.
I
I
think
love it.
so.
I love it so much. I love it so much. Am I having a tough time with Hamish Linklater's prosthetics?
Me too.
Of course I am.
This is my one problem, and I love Hamish Linklater, and he's a great choice for Lincoln. But like, you didn't
He-
really have to go in on the prosthetics. You could have just had
Nope.
Hamish Linklater with like some very minor makeup, you know.
I
And
mean,
maybe that-
Daniel Day-Lewis really lucked out in the sense that he looks like Abraham
he
Lincoln. He
does.
already
Yes,
has an angular, sunken, hollow face. The
he
way that
does.
somehow 57, emotionally 85-year-old Abraham Lincoln did. Everybody else is just cursed with trying to follow Daniel
Yeah,
Day-Lewis forever. You'll never be able to. He'll forever be the Abraham Lincoln
yeah,
for me.
yeah. That is a problem. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What's your
Tobias
happy
Menzies though
thing?
as Stanton is great, and
Oh,
it's good.
girl.
It's a good show.
Yes.
My happy thing. So I again, this is not evergreen territory, but two of my former students who I used to teach in high school are in the WNBA or WNBA NCAA women's basketball
What?
tournament. Yeah,
That's
and
awesome.
one of them got eliminated yesterday. She plays for Holy Cross, and they were playing against Iowa, against Caitlin Clark. They were playing Caitlin Clark, which was really
Oh,
cool.
Miss, here's my fucking ring. Check my ring, ring.
Yeah, like the
She
best
got in
one.
trouble for that.
She did.
She's
They
a
got
record
killed.
breaker, so she could do
They got
that.
killed. Yeah, they were
Oh,
the 16th seed, and Iowa was of course number 1, and so they got killed.
yeah.
But another one, Olivia Sumiel, who plays for Virginia Tech. They are currently down 3 points in the fourth quarter against Baylor. They're pretty evenly matched, but Baylor,
Mm,
it appears to they've been sort of up on them the whole game.
yeah.
So they're probably out too, but it's very cool too, because I do
That's
not
really
care at
cool.
all about college basketball. Like, it's one of those things that I just can't, for the life of me, I cannot get into college sports. I don't care how many people
Well,
try and get me
it's
into it. I
just
can't do
it's
it.
just not it's not I don't know, it's not good. It's not good.
I got nothing to attach to. Like, I've got no emotional connection to any
Well,
colleges,
because the
and so I
turnover
can't do
rate
it.
too. Like, I guess you really have to
That's the
love a
other thing.
team, but
Yes.
I guess you could follow a player into their professional career if such a
Sure.
thing happens. But other than that, it's like every few years you're like, oh fuck, who are these people? I gotta get used to
Right.
this person now. It's not as fun.
Yeah, no, that's part of my issue, is that, and like I guess if I grew up like in a town that like the college team was like the team, I could see it, but like
Mm.
I don't. It just doesn't do anything for me at all. I can't do brackets, and can't care about it. But it's been cool to see two people that I know playing, and it's
That's
been fun to
really
watch
cool.
that.
And they're gals, which I love.
Yeah, and they're also like both really good people. So and just great
That's
human beings.
exciting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, guys, next year will be your year, unless you're seniors, in which
Well, they're
case, I don't
seniors,
know.
but they're both also like yeah, they're both seniors, but they're both probably also going to play professionally because they're both very, very good. So.
Okay, then, guys, come to the Washington Mystics. Well, let's go to Ford's Theater together. Okay, the Mystics won like a few years ago. We were the champions. So the Mystics are good. Our team is good, even
Yep,
if the Wizards are terrible. So
they are. They definitely are. The Wizards are very
mhm,
bad. Mystics are good.
mhm.
Yeah, that's it.
So
Cool. All right. Well, that's that. And send us an email, 1999 at cageclub.me, and we'll be back soon. Look out for frogs.